Hey, folks, welcome back to the Pulse. My name is Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat. It's 11 o'clock Central Texas time, and it is Friday once again, December 29th. And this is episode 34 of Right Side Up with Steve Staggs. 34 episodes, folks. That's craziness. I hope you had a great Christmas. That's what we just did, right? Sometimes to me, it just literally they all blend together at some point in time, and it's really important to pause. And I think a lot of people are pausing right now in kind of time in between kind of the Christmas holiday and New Year. And so Steve said, let's do this while we've got this little kind of pause in a way. But I wanted to share with you some things. We're going to drill into something today that actually relates to crypto. And it's a bit of a real time realization of my own personal journey with Jesus. And I want to share that with you. And I'm going to ask Steve in real time about it. And you're going to see what the nature of our private conversations are like because he has no idea what's coming. Um, but I wanted to also share this. There's a lot of people that are struggling. There's a lot of crazy stuff happening on the world. There's all kinds of things. You want to talk about right side up versus upside down. Things are upside down. And it is, you don't have to look far to see how upside down it is. And I was just encouraged this morning. I started at 4 a.m. this morning, which is crazy. But I had a lot of time to reflect. And one of the things that got me this morning was Isaiah 40:29. And I was reminded, he gives power to the faint, and to them that have no might, he increased strength. He gives power to the faint, and to them that have no might, he increases strength. This idea that what is our own personal strength, and this idea that is he like stronger when I'm weak? It's weird. It's always so counterintuitive. And that's what we're going to examine today. We're going to examine this idea of, strength in our weakness, but also the very nature of why is this thing upside down? And what does it mean to be right side up? Those are kind of the things we're talking about. But I'm glad you're here. I'm really excited about to sharing this and continuing this journey with Steve-O himself. Ladies and gentlemen, back again. What's up, Steve?
Hey, dude. How
How are you? I'm
I'm doing
good.
good, man.
Good.
Yeah,
How was Christmas, man?
it was our overused word, awesome.
Yeah.
It
Oh, that's
was
great.
great.
Well,
Yeah,
I
we
said
had.
last time that you have a way of creating an environment. I'm sure those kids are so blessed. You and
Well,
Marcia bringing them together.
and it comes back our way as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the great blessings in our lives is the volume and the way in which our children include us in their lives, and that
Yeah.
includes not only our children but our grandchildren. Chris, times like Christmas are just
Yeah.
wonderful because of that. Yeah,
Well, and what a testament to seeds that you've sown over time, right? I mean, the proof of your effectiveness is ultimately the result that comes out of that. Having children who want to be around you, want to spend time,
yeah,
want the kids to be engaged. You're right. I mean, that's like evidence of long cultivation, and I think it's I don't know what good analogies, a crown, a reward, a blessing. It is all of those things plus.
just
And
good
so,
stuff.
yeah, it really is. Well, we got our favorite folks back again. Mike Ostel, number
Yeah.
one. Happy New Year to this special group of friends. You know what's so cool? It's like every time I see Mike in the chat, I'm like, here we go. This is the day
Yeah,
the Lord has made. Let's
yeah,
rejoice and be glad in it, man. Um, a special group of friends. Isn't it cool? We've got friends across the world, and we don't
yeah,
even have to be, you know, you and I are separated by at least 100 miles here. So we're doing it with the technology. Mike says, "Jesus, I'm with you. I'm your man." What a great
yeah.
statement.
That kind of sums it up, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Right
it
there.
does. Like, yeah, it's like, all right, it's a lamp into my feet, not a laser beam to the future. Quinn is here too. You know what?
Hello,
I've been
Quinn.
talking to Quinn. I was thinking, whenever I see Quinn, because she was Hexy Quinn and now she's just Quinn, which I appreciate. But I always think of quintessential, right?
Oh wow, yes,
The essential things, the quintessential things. Thank you for being here, Quinn. It's wonderful to have you. And then of course Godfather J6, who is just literally burning the barn down. He has been in every stream, but also started his own stream, and he's a gifted guy. Thanks for being here. Joey Torres is back. What's up, Joey? ID back again. Hola, hola. It's great to have you here. Appreciate you, Identity Block, for being here. All right, Steve, you ready for this one?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
This is a challenge for me. And so, guys, you're going to experience this in real time. I've not given him any heads up on what I'm going to share. And so let me do this intro, and I'll see what you think about this. So I got up at 4. I've been praying, about a very concerning topic to me, really related to resourcing, right? And really struggling with, we have so many amazing things on the horizon, right? We see amazing things happening. You and I had like an incredible conversation yesterday. We're seeing this unlocking of generosity. We're seeing left-hand side, right-hand side stuff. We're seeing this future abundance. We're understanding. I'm understanding more and more my role in all of this, and it's like super empowering and super encouraging. But it's also in the face of, weakness and challenge, and it's all around. And you've constantly reminded me, hey, only Jesus has the authority to speak to you. Right. And so we don't let these other things in. But I'm going to share with you what happened this morning. And this is really interesting for me. So as I'm praying about resourcing and how do we make it? How do we make it, through the next day? And, as men, I think in our culture, there's a lot of pressure on guys to provide, especially if you're like really committed to a family and all those things. And then, of course, if you're in business and you're taking it seriously, you feel the weight of responsibility, and you've created a team. It's just like anything, right? Being a coach of a team, you care about your players, and you want, there's more to it than just winning the game. There's a whole process in all of that, and that can weigh on you. And it's weighing on me. And so literally this morning, I'm having this conversation with Jesus, and he leads me to this verse. And boy, oh boy, this rocked my world. This is Jude, the last place I would have been. This is Jude 1:11. I'm going to use King James here.
Hey, you're getting good at using that little app.
Yeah. Woe unto them, for they have gone in the way of Cain and ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of Kor. So if we jump into the Greek here for fun here, this is what's amazing to me, right? So here we go. Woe to them. They have traveled the journey of Cain, obviously, Cain slaying Abel. So we've got that challenge, right? The taking of the life of the one who was honoring God. And they have rushed headlong. But look what the word they're using for headlong here. Isn't this interesting? The word headlong that they've put in the translation is a word that's about pay, wages, salary, reward, recompense, punishment. Apparently, a primary word, pay for service, good or bad. Never in my life have I applied the word headlong to those terms.
Yep.
That is 100% out of place.
Yep.
Okay. So this is a great example of this process, right? They have rushed. And you think about this, pay, wages, salary, reward, punishment. It's interesting what is here. Pay for services, good or bad, into the error, into the error of Balaam. So obviously I had plenty of time this morning, and so I went into the error of Balaam. And of course, that story of Balaam is the one in which he was essentially a non-Jewish prophet, right?
Yep.
Had the ability to curse or to praise, and was essentially bribed to curse the Israelites. And of course, his donkey wouldn't move. And it's interesting how the angel stood in the path, right, and stopped him from doing this. But this idea of going down this path of bribery, right? And it says, so that we've got Cain, we've got Balaam, we've got this whole interesting thing that we're using headlong for, which is about pay, wages, salary, reward, right? And then they have perished in Korah's rebellion. And of course, the story of Korah's rebellion from Numbers like 17 is ultimately where the leaders of Israel that went up against Moses and Aaron literally were liquefied. I mean, they
Yeah.
were burnt to a crisp. Their tents, the earth opened up, swallowed them, and then there was a plague. And like they say in that like 14,000 people died because of this. And these were the leaders and the people of Israel. So, Steve, I took this really seriously this morning,
Yeah.
and I really was convicted, and I was really challenged by this, because when I looked at other translations, this talked about profit. The word they're using headlong here just it shouldn't even be there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And there have been some translations that talk about this as profit. So they have rushed, they've basically been like Cain, killing, right? Extracting. They've rushed, right? Meaning out of time. And they have, for profit, they have in error been bribed and ultimately will be destroyed.
Yes.
That's a big warning. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me jump back into this with you and say this. I literally was kind of flat-footed from this, and this is what the discussion that I had this morning. Cryptocurrency in its current form. I got into Hex. And what did I do? I saw this ad on late night television, and I'm like, oh, big payday. Do you want to be a billionaire? Whoo, right? Promises, right? And what's the story? And what's the story of altcoins in this era of crypto? Well, there's a lot of accusations about it being degenerate gambling, the casino, if you will. And of course, it's highly manipulated. We know of things like rug pulls, and we know things of deceit, and we know of YouTube influencers telling you, buy this token, shill this. In reality, they're dumping on your heads. And it becomes, as we've discussed, left hand, right hand side of the slide, has become a part of an extraction model. And so one of the things I've learned over the last 2 years is that if you want your token to pump, I mean, if you've got money and you've got the ability to market, you can convince dumb people to buy your token. You can even convince smart people to buy your token. And in the background, you can manipulate it. And how do you manipulate it? Well, it's not tied to anything of value. It's based on people's awareness, right? So it's promotion. And so you could say, well, a lot of products are promoted. Okay, so you promote something and people put in their resources, right? And it builds momentum. And if you tie it in with the cycles, right? We've seen this is the fourth cycle in crypto. We see some amazing runs because what's happening is this era of the blockchain is about adoption. And so we talk about Metcalfe's law that more people that come in, more buyers than sellers, the price goes up. But of course, I've run a cryptocurrency channel, right? And I've talked about Hex and excitement of this. And I see this future of, wow, decentralized finance has the potential to really be an alternative to the current existing system that's not fair. And so then I meet Steve Staggs, and he tells me about all this stuff related to the left hand and right hand side. We talk about the kingdom of heaven. And we say, what is our role in this? And we say, hey, Jesus taught us to pray, our Father who art in heaven, holy be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Okay. And there's this difference between, extraction and destroying and killing. And then this idea of the nature and character of the one who created it all, who seeks to bless and protect, and that we would animate these tools of the blockchain in his nature and character. And then we layer in the giving of the 5 loaves and 2 fish and the unlocking of generosity. And all of those things swirl around in my head, and I realize something. Crypto in its current existing form, if taken in isolation, is left-hand side of the slide manipulation. And it is extractive in nature. Meaning, I was shilling the thing, excited about Pulse Chain and all this stuff, and I know specific people by name who got in at 42 cents. Well, the people that understood how the cycles work, when they saw it running up there, they started taking profits. And I know a number of them who took out a lot of money. Well, whose money was that? Well, I mean, you'd say, well, it's the market's money, but someone put it in, right? And I'm not saying all things are fair, right? This is kind of a competitive landscape. And you're like, but as you promote this system, and I think where the conviction comes from is this idea that not everyone can get in at the beginning of things, right? And not everyone can predict the future. But we often say that leverage trading is stealing from the guy on the other side of the computer screen, right? Somebody wins and someone loses. But what we think about, because it's in aggregate, we don't see that kind of extraction happening. But in reality, there are people who got in and they were told. So, for example, there's a highest of stakes movie, and that movie illustrates a guy who put all of his house money into Hex at 42 cents. It went to 52, and now it's at like a penny. And he turned probably whatever that money was in, it's dropped 85, 95%. The story that we tell each other is just hang on, buddy. Dollar cost average, get yourself into this, just, diamond hands, and it'll come back. It might, or it might not. I don't know the future of this. But this system is still one that sits on the left-hand side of this slide that's based on the manipulation of people and a narrative, using a story to basically convince people to do that. Because what happens is if you want to create a successful cryptocurrency, you know what you do? Start with a lot of money, launch something, market the heck out of it, and then as people are buying it, you continue to protect the price and keep buying it up. The best marketing in cryptocurrency is green candles as it relates to the market cycle. If you can show it pumping in the market cycle, you attract people. Degenerate people and others come into this and they see this, and some people ride it up. I did the same thing. I got into Hex and it went up 25x for me. Okay. My $600 turned into 25 or $15,000. Okay, great. Well, you timed the market pretty well. But ultimately, the conviction of, Jude 111 is, Matt, even though you think what you're doing may have some long-term benefit, you're participating with Cain, with Balaam, and with Korah. And that's a challenge, Steve Staggs, when you're running a cryptocurrency channel.
You're not much appreciating that assessment.
And you know what I don't like about it is I go for counsel to Jesus and he convicts me of the very core thing that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it's not very comfortable, right? But this is the nature of things. It wrecks you in some respects. However, so what I want to do with you today, Steve, is I would like you to counsel me in this process, because just as I see it for what it is, and you can't unsee it after you see it, there's also a future promise of what is actually happening and taking place and what our role and responsibility is in this, right? So I could justify in the natural, I could say, well, Steve, we have to have an alternative to the worst system, right? This other system is extracting. But you know as well as I do, once you know and understand this nature of the kingdom, you don't want to animate tools for the left side. You want to animate tools for the right side.
Yes.
That's what's going on with me, Steve.
Welcome to the game, Matt.
Yeah, it sucks.
Hey, my friend. Gosh, there's just so many things to, I do not know a single person, including myself, who has not ventured into this journey with Jesus, who has not had not just one, but multiple experiences of the kind that you're describing. And here's the way that I eventually came to my own point of resolution. And the reason I call this resolution is because there is a decision that has to be made. The more you hang with Jesus, the more you come to realize he is all about making decisions. Decisions are the products of choice. Nothing changes apart from a decision.
Yeah.
Nothing happens apart from a decision. Decisions are the seeds of reality's harvest. Okay? And you're about to sow some really significant seeds through the choices and decisions you're about to make. And here is the fundamental decision you're being confronted with. Jesus never enters darkness, he never exits or leaves light. If you're going to hang with him, you have to get used to hanging with a being who is involved with absolute light. And so there is nothing hidden except to be revealed. Now, he doesn't blast you with, with light that cripples you or kills you, but he reveals the essential things that are part of that will contribute to the left-hand side of the slide using that description in the way that you are, just again, describing your experience this morning. You're connecting all of these dots. And at the center of this dot right now, he's saying, okay, Matt, if you're going to hang with me, here's what we have to deal with. We're not going to do this in the way of Cain. We're not going to do this in the way of Balaam. Okay? Interesting, both of those were related to sacrifice. Nor are we going to do this in the way of Korah, where there was a challenge of the authority against Moses and Aaron. And once they challenged Moses and Aaron, guess who they were challenging?
God himself.
Yeah. And for an example for us all is like, okay, if that's the way you want to do this, here's how this looks. If you walk with me, you are no longer those who choose to walk in darkness. Now, we use that as a metaphorical term. We use that as a spiritual term. We use that as a religious term. We use that to describe a concept. No. It is the reality of choosing to live where you are no longer willing to be ultimately transparent in the things that you do. Now, question is, why aren't you transparent? Yesterday, I shared with you, a man of truth will do in the beginning what he promises to do in the end. Why? Because he's transparent. He doesn't care what you see about him, good, bad, or ugly. Hey, man, I've walked this planet just like everybody else, and I've been had, and I've had other people.
Yep.
And I'm not glad that I got had, but neither am I happy that I had other people. But that's just it. Here's where I am today. As for me and my house, we will serve Jehovah. That's how it works. I'm not interested in doing any of those things that contribute to darkness, because I have seen what they have done with my life. Now, here's the point. Saying all that, here's now the punchline on all this. Matt, Steve, whomever, are you willing to continue the journey with one who is absolute light? There are no secrets any longer. And the secrets that are there, they are going to come to the light, and we're going to have to deal with them at that moment in time, because they will defile, I'm going to use that defile word, causing to decay those things that we are doing together.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, are you interested in injecting cancer into our various work, our projects and work? Well, what do you mean? Well, if I were to say, hey, Steve, how cool are you with me injecting you with cancer that'll consume your physical body? Would you be all for that?
Let's not do that.
Let's not do that. I'm not interested in that particular thing, Lord. Well, that's what happens when you choose to no longer walk in light. You inject a cancer, a decaying element into the work that we are doing together. Now let's go back to our conferring concept, our exchanging of wishes. Steve, is that what you're saying you wish to do? Because, Steve, that's not what I wish to do. So are we in alignment? And at that point, there's a choice to be made. Okay, Lord. Now, notice I'm using Lord in this description, in this part of the conversation. That's because you're not talking to him as a friend at that point, as Jesus, as a co-worker. You're talking to the one who has authority over whether you proceed or don't. He's saying, we're not going any further till you deal with this, and then you get a chance to exercise your Elohim authority, your sovereign authority, to say yes or no. Kind of sounds like what was happening with Cain, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Cain, buddy, why are you so bummed out? Won't things get a whole lot better? Won't your countenance lift if you start operating in the higher order of your appointment? To show that you are operating in a higher character? For sin is crouching at the door like a recumbent animal, and it is poised to pounce on you. Notice the sin was outside the door. It did not have the power to enter. It only had the power to position itself subject to the decision. Okay, its sin is ready to pounce. And then the final word that Jehovah said to him was, you must master it. Now, what's fascinating in the Christian world, we have been told and have accepted that we cannot master sin. We are only no good, filthy sinners that can do nothing but sin. Well, Jehovah doesn't agree with that, apparently. Because he told Cain his job was to master it.
Yeah.
Cain was at a point of decision. Am I going to align myself with the one whom I have just offered a sacrifice of praise and thanksgiving? I'm totally bummed out that he didn't accept my sacrifice out of the hard work of my labor. And instead he rejected it. Well, why did he reject it? Because he had something he wanted to deal with Cain. See, we want to make it all about the sacrifice. No, Jehovah's making it about the thing that was operating in the one making the sacrifice. So we've got to deal with this. It's your choice. Every one of us are at that point, Matt. And it will happen multiple times as you go through this, as we go through it, because he doesn't deal with us all at one time. He deals with us incrementally because we couldn't take it otherwise.
Oh, that's the truth.
You know, I mean, just look at how you're feeling right now, and he's just dealing with this one, a realization. You're not attempting to do any of these things. He is just pulling back the covers to say, this is the direction you're going if we don't deal with this now.
Yeah.
Now, final thing I'll mention is that you and I have had many conversations that crypto is having an identity crisis. It doesn't know yet if it's going to be an investment vehicle or if it's going to be a currency. If it's going to be a currency and you're going to operate in the kingdom side of things, this thing can't be rooted in an investment model. Can't do that. Because in the investment world, volatility is crucial.
Yep.
Especially on the left side of the slide. So there is an identity crisis going on with crypto. And you're at the point where before you go further, Jesus is saying, okay, Matt, let's deal with this because you don't know it, but you're heading into a direction you will not appreciate, and I'm going to head you off before you get there. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
yeah. Well, and that's certainly one part of it. So I think what I'd like to examine with you is this idea of animating tools. Okay, so let's talk about what is crypto, right?
Yeah.
And being a founder of a token and laboring over building tokenomics and coding and marketing and all that kind of stuff and thinking through this and the models and the things that have happened and the intent is great, right? I don't feel the conviction is not around should there be a scenario in which the people can have truth in the transaction. Is that good? Yes. I believe that the right-hand side of this, right, this kingdom idea is this idea that, like you said, the man speaks truth. It's transparent, right? And I look at it at its very core. It's cool that Jesus was a carpenter, right? This idea that what's at the base layer of all value but human labor. And if we think about this idea of you can build something or serve someone, you can build a product or you can serve someone and bring value. And that's through your creative ability, and it's unique to us. That's what we monetize, right? That's what we put value on. Now, you might be strategic about getting people to work for you and, run a steel mill, but there's also it's almost interesting how it's a series of handoffs. And each one of those handoffs is either in the nature and character of God or it's not, right? And you can defile it at many stages in the process. And so I think what I'm reflecting upon is the calling and what we've seen in this tool is opportunity. And I think on one hand, the opportunity that's most often dangled in front of people's face is this mad gains, right? 10,000x. Well, where did that 10,000x come from? Well, it came from the collective contribution of the community. And what is so convicting about this is when you look at it, because you're absolutely right, crypto as investment is one of volatility. Now, you could also say, what is this new economic order? Right? Everything has a beginning and an end. Started in a garden and it finishes in a city. There's growth to this thing that God created. Okay, well, the introduction of Bitcoin at the very beginning and where it is today is different. It's grown. New technological things have come along, but we've even dissected DeFi from crypto, right? It's a different thing. We understand the principles that we think are related in the nature and character of God, truth, justice, all of the things that you would think are, transparency, censorship resistant, no middlemen, that kind of thing. Like, kind of what are the components of this tool that ensure a more fair outcome? And so I think I could ascribe those and say, okay, yeah, the nature and character of these things make sense. However, I think that the warning is in this early stage, right? Because let me just give you an example because it illustrates your point. The identity crisis is a function of its growth, and it's a function of the time. There's going to be a point, right? 5% of the population's in crypto. Bitcoin's number one. It started out at pennies or nothing, and it went to $69,000 a token. Every time. The first time, it was like many thousands of X, and then it was 600X, and then it was 100X, and then it was 20X, and then it was 5X or 6X. Each subsequent cycle, there's less volatility. And of course, we see that with established investment vehicles like gold, for example. Well, you go from this digital asset of Bitcoin, and it becomes more like a stable coin, right? Once it gets out into the market and gets adopted, it ends up almost leveling into its place, right? And so in the mad gain worlds of volatile cryptocurrency, people are like, I don't like Bitcoin because I'm not going to get a 100x. I'm going to get maybe a 2x if I'm lucky. Now, there's people that are really bullish on it and really bearish on it. But let's say you think in terms of 10 more cycles. Well, these cycles aren't as big, and it reaches the top of this S curve and becomes more stable. But it retains this general value, and it doesn't go down 85%. It might go down 15, 20%. And so it becomes more stable. But you're right, it's not technically legal tender currency that is stable at a rate. And of course, you could debate that fiat also is not stable.
Yep.
But I guess the point I'm making is that when you look at the long term of this and you say, all right, we're animating these tools, our desire, our intent is that we would utilize and animate these tools of the blockchain in the nature and character of God that would bless and protect. Well, what it comes back to is if people are taking their proxies for labor and they're putting it into these contracts, we then have to have truth in the transaction, meaning what we're telling people is true, the best that we can possibly do that, right? And so one of the things I feel good about is the fact that, warning, understand what you're getting into. This is early. There could be really, really good gains, but if you don't understand the cycle, so the education around, hey, this volatility is driven because it's new. And if you strike a nerve with people, a ton of people come in and the price goes through the roof because of the nature of this tool. So obviously the extraction component of this, I think, can be utilized for darkness as a means of extraction, right? Because, I'm very sensitive to the fact that, let's say someone comes into the community and is so excited because they hold a big bag of something, right? So let's just use Hex because that's what I came to. They have a huge bag of Hex. Well, what do the OG Hexicans want? You to buy Hex, right? If you got something and you got in low, you want everyone to buy it. Why? Because it's good for you, right? So there's a selfish ambition in that, right? It's like, yeah, I want my thing to be more. And I saw it at 52 cents and I want to see it there again. Frankly, I want to see it at $5. But I know the only way I can do it is if someone else comes in. I think the crisis for me of conviction is around the fact that the system is set up, at least in its current state, that I understand there's going to be another top. Hey, I don't know if you know this, but Richard Hart called the top on the day. I don't know if you've ever heard that. But what is interesting about that is someone will lose. Now, long term, they may win because of the nature of this cycle and adoption, right? That it will, if you do hang on, I suppose at some point in time, you're going to be okay. But I think what Jesus is establishing, what this thing is right now, the speculative nature of crypto, is that it is being used maybe in a dual form. On one hand, it can be highly manipulated by people, and grandma's grandson's like, yeah, put it all in. Okay, well, this is what I saved up for your college and all the kids and everything, and put your life savings into Hex at 42 cents. And people did that. Well, someone convinced them to do that, and that, to me, it wrecked them, right? That's the term we would use in this. It's not that I don't want to be party to anything that could ever wreck people, because people have died in cars, and I drive a car every day. And I don't say to people, never drive a car because one person died in a car. So I want to be able to dissect this in the sense that there's this bigger idea of the kingdom. Yeah. And I see that in this unlocking of global generosity. I see that in, hey, a boy brought his 5 loaves and 2 fish, and the people that were looking around didn't decide to well, I'll sell my extra to my neighbor. No, they said, hey, we could share. It's a different model. It's a whole different idea of saying letting go versus, well, I've got a little extra, I'll charge you for it. No, it's like, well, and somebody gave, and hey, everybody needs to eat. We brought some extra, and there were 12 basketfuls left over. That's a wholesale model change from get in at the right time and get yours. Because what I'm recognizing from this is, in its current scenario, whatever you promote or whether you're honest about it or not, the players in this system, it's built for extraction at this time in its cycle. The question is, the redemption of it, the reanimation of it, and the intent of it is obviously important, but I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? So one of the things that I feel very confident of, and the reason I even do these streams on Friday with you, is because I believe that this is it's bait. This whole thing of the money and what you think is going to bring you peace is bait. If I was just financially set, Steve, I'd have peace. No, you won't. You'll have more problems.
Yeah.
But I'd be gladly come alongside that lie to tell you the truth. And so I justify my presence in this, but also feel like light is being shed on the truth of it, or potentially the dangers of it.
Yeah.
Because I can drive safely to work, or I could go way over the speed limit and drink and drive or whatever, right? So there's animation functions of this tool. Help me understand and dissect this, because I don't want to just say, well, I don't want to have anything to do with cryptocurrency because there's somebody that could potentially use it to manipulate someone, and someone who will lie to someone and misrepresent it, and somebody's going to get wrecked. So I don't want to have anything to do with it. That's not what I'm saying, but
Yeah.
I also want to be open to the fact that I didn't have this, this revelation this morning is not one that I want to not examine.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for you, Matt. One of the great challenges that we go through, and I'm speaking on a very personal level here, is the decoupling of the device from the nature and character that is animating the device. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of that decoupling. When we had the stream, the episode about when we looked at the slide, the left side, right side slide, which was a little bit of a continuation from what you asked me to introduce at the Gen Con conference, is that these are not two different systems. This is the same system operated in a different spirit or a different nature and character. It's the same system. So, okay, Steve, how can you say it's the same system? Okay, so I'm going to pause here. Let's back up. John 1:1. For some of our friends that really like to have, biblical verses and stuff. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Okay? And the Word was in the beginning, with God. And the Word was life, and the life was the light of men. And all things that came into being were made by Him. And nothing has come into being except it has been made by Him. So let's pause and look at that for a minute. All things that have been created by the Word. Okay? The Word proceeds out. That word is logos. That Greek word logos, we don't have a singular word, to relate to that or describe that word logos. So we have to use a lot of words, English words, to describe it. It is a word, a statement, an idea, a concept that expresses the philosophy and of the one speaking it, as well as transferring to the listener the nature and character that speaker possesses. Now, what I just described is how the spiritual world births its children in the physical world through the speaking. Okay? And so God, and then that picture is the picture of the Father speaking out of him, the Son, Jesus, then speaking what the Father speaks to create. Everything that has been created was created by him, and nothing that exists was created apart from him. So going back to, so let's pause. Everything that we see, Jesus created the ability to be manifested in its form. Everything. And nothing that we see can exist apart from him. Well, if that's the case, then how come these systems exploit us? How come these systems deal treacherously with us? Well, because it's not the system. It's the spirit, it's the nature and character that's animating that system. You use the example all the time about the gun. The gun just sits there. It doesn't have anything to do. It's just going to sit there. The system that has been created to launch a projectile, it just sits there. It's neutral. It's waiting for a spirit, for an animating force to come in and then utilize it in the manner that that animating force wants to use it and what it wants to accomplish through its use. Once again, I'm going to pause. This slide is a representation of what we talked about last week. For God so loved the cosmos. He loved the order and arrangement that he put in place, the tools that he put in place to administer his creation. He loved that. Why? Because it's designed to produce good. What's it doing right now? It's producing death and destruction. It's producing extraction. It's exploiting. It's looking for ways to pump my bags so that I can transfer my risk to another party and be relieved of the risk that I am currently operating under.
Wow. You know, let me pause you there. You just said transferring the risk to another party.
Yep.
That's the first time I've heard that from you. I want to just put parentheses around that because that's exactly what it's doing. I mean,
Yeah.
think about this for a second. Let's say, and we don't think about this ever, right? People very, very rarely think about this. That when we promote to someone, we don't know the future. And certainly I think with somewhat clean hands, people would say, hey, this is the future, man, right? Look at these T-shares, look at this thing, look at what it's done, look at what it could do, and don't listen to the FUD, right? So there's I think some manipulation in that, but there's also some marketing, salesmanship, if you will. And then you think about this idea, well, I don't want to really advocate for you to put in more than you're willing to lose, but in some respects, I don't really care, right? So I'm willing to say I'll exchange my comfort of financial security, but in reality, the people that buy tops and sell bottoms, we make fun of them,
Yeah.
right? We're not in community with them. We're like, I don't mind if you're going to be an idiot. I'm going to extract from you. But what you don't think about is the grandson that convinced grandma to put it all in. I'm not saying that that's how it always works. It is the nature of the timing of things that where we are, but that happens, right? It's not exclusively that. But I think this is a really good point you're making, which is the transferring of the risk to another party, which to me is really the whole point of my morning aha is that it's the same system. We're participating, it's the same thing if we animate it the same way. And it's like if we participated with this tool and animated it the same way, we're going to get the same thing we always get. And
Yep.
that's exploitation, control, punishment, enslavement. It's going to be the things that we don't want, what we say we don't want, but we're participating in it, and we're adding energy to an extractive system.
And we don't even know we're doing it, Matt. That's
Right.
the
That's my
point.
point. That's the
Yep.
point.
We don't even know we're doing it. We think we're actually doing things for good.
Yep.
When we were at Gen Con, one of the things that I shared there that seemed to be an aha for a lot of folks there is that we have been sold this bill of goods that Satan, everything he does is to destroy everything that we're involved in, and that his realm is all about killing and destroying and you know and creating havoc for us. And it was like, no, that's not the case at all. He requires righteousness to operate in his realm. He requires honesty to operate in his realm. He requires facts to operate in his realm. He requires peace, well-being, safety to operate in his realm, because otherwise his realm falls apart. Now, that's a hard concept to get in mind when you've been trained your entire life the opposite. No, look at, he's a limited being. He's looking for a kingdom. He's building a kingdom. He does not want to build a kingdom with chaos. Now, that's his intention. That's what he needs. Now, the reality is that he will kill anything that ultimately won't, comply with his requirements. He will destroy virtually everything he sets his hands to. Why? Because he has no truth. He has no life in him. He has no wisdom in him. So the only outcome can be destruction. But that does not mean that's what he's intending. He's intending for this thing to operate smooth as silk, because he does not have infinite capacity to deal with all of the problems that his character creates. Now, I don't know if that registers with anybody, but it really sunk in to a number of people at the Gen Con conference. No, if you think he's just trying to create chaos, you don't understand how this game is played.
Well, and that's the whole Kobayashi thing in The Usual Suspects, right?
Oh, yeah, right on.
It's the greatest trick the devil ever played, was to convince people he didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I think that you make another great point, is that if I can set up the systems that run smooth as silk, that promote the establishment and growth of my kingdom, which is one of, Satan's kingdom, well, I look back into, how are we animating the tools? Well, look at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution and the big magnates in the US, right? Steel,
Yeah.
Carnegie, Standard Oil, Rockefeller. What birthed out of that Industrial Revolution except basically unions?
Yeah.
Well, what was happening? We literally extracted value. It was unsafe. And of course, people organized because they're like, hey, this is not good, right? You're extracting so much out of us, and basically on the backs of the workers, that we've got to, rise up and push back. Of course, that system got corrupted as well, because it became, what the unions became. But it's really interesting to see that this cycle continues, but it's one that, you're right. If I can get an extraction model to work well, and this is tough stuff, right? This
Yeah.
is tough stuff, because I think about this. What's the nature and character of it? Well, I can see Richard Hart saying this. I want to help as many people win as I can. Okay, so this is kind of how he would potentially justify this. Current system, everybody's losing. And as we rise up against this centralized Leviathan, we're going to use the tool that is going to break their back. Pandora's box is open. This decentralized finance thing says we can get together and collude, create a cartel, if you will, and we can amass our own value outside the system. And you could say, hey, that's good. That this idea of having an option, an alternative where we actually can kind of, the supply doesn't change, right? The expectations are clear and they do not change. That's a nice addition to this problem, right? Right now, there are centralized parties who decide they're going to print 8 trillion more dollars during COVID. Okay, well, this alternative isn't as bad, and there are more people that participate in and benefit from. So it's a wider distribution of the resource. But there are winners and there are losers in that model as well. I just have this feeling, though, what was shown to me this morning is that there is an alternative to even that system.
Oh
But it's
yeah,
very possible that in this process, which this slide illustrates, is actually that this may be a mechanism that can be animated for good that actually facilitates the transfer.
Matt, these two sides of the slide are the identical system. See, that is that decoupling thing. Okay, if we were talking with Richard Hart and the bad guy is centralized, notice what he said: centralized parties is the way you described it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what is the bad guy? The parties that are administering, managing, and ruling over that, or is it the system?
Right. It's the
And
people, the intent of the people. Yeah.
yeah. And so the thing I would ask is, okay, Richard, if you were in charge of that centralized system, would it still be exploitive? And I'd say, well, if you really want to help the people win, guess what? There is every capability within that current system for that to happen. Okay, let me give you an example. All right. Can you go to the next slide to this one?
I don't have the deck. I just have this image. I'll find it. I'll find it though.
While we're talking about, because that is the difficult thing for us. Speaking for myself, and so I think I'm pretty common with most folks, is the character, nature and character that's animating the system. We have so commingled that nature and character with the system we call the system. We don't separate the system from the one operating the system. And yet, you have to, if you're going to understand the kingdom of God, if you're going to understand what is in play in this good and evil dynamic. By the way, whether or not you attribute any spiritual component to this whatsoever in the way that we are describing it, even an atheist, somebody who claims to be one, the same concept works. If you operate the centralized system truthfully without any intention to exploit or extract, but only to serve the best interests of the parties who are playing in that system, what would be the outcome?
Right.
Would it still be exploitive? No. Why not? Because I wouldn't tolerate it, because I've already made a commitment to dealing honestly, with integrity, without exploitation, without any intention to extract, only to produce. Oh, wow. That is how the system has been designed to function. And until we can decouple the animating force behind the system, we don't really understand how the game is played.
Okay. So let me throw a potential scenario into this.
Okay.
You're the general of an army. Oh no, let's not use that. You're the leader of a country
Okay.
who has an army, has all of these resources, right? And
Yeah.
your intent, your desire, your purpose is to rule and to reign in the nature and character of God, to bless and protect, right? You are that leader, right?
Yeah.
And you just said this. If Richard Hart was in control of this system, would it be extractive? And you'd say no. Okay. Meanwhile, you get a call and you hear that some troops in the field just killed someone, and they're under your authority. And it was criminal. And of course, you're going to obviously punish them for that, but they're a representation of you. Your intent is to bless and protect in its nature and character. And there's a lot of pieces to this whole thing, right? You came into that system. Your intent, all of the things you're doing are right on. What's challenging about this is in order for it all to work, the real transfer, and I think this is potentially why we're like on this side of the, this side of glory, if you will, is that all participants in the system have to see it the same way, because there are those who, let's say, yeah, I'm going to take advantage of the new president, Steve. He's such a good guy. I'm going to exploit his generosity. He's trying to rule and reign in the nature and character. And we see this all the time, right? Is that there are so many pieces and so much hierarchy within the system. And we see someone and you're like, hey, this is a good politician, or this is I really trust this person. It doesn't make it down to the ranks. And there are people that are mounting coups in the 3-letter agencies that are killing people.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, it feels a lot like, Steve, obviously you can control your own self. And it's hard to imagine everybody at once leading in his nature and character and understanding the benefit and the value of that. But that kind of happened in the feeding of the 5,000, right?
Yeah.
It had this moment where people went, oh, okay, we can share. And that is that unlocking mechanism. But there's always seems to be that challenge when you have God's man making decisions. What do you say? I mean, you really only have responsibility over yourself or those that are in direct, authority. So,
Yeah.
and I don't want to say it's futile, Steve, but
Yeah,
I
no,
do
I
feel
get it.
like it's a challenge, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the size of it is a challenge.
Yeah. Well, what you just described is Jehovah when he created. Okay, what did he do?
Yeah, good point.
He created, and before he rested, he built an army. Before he rested on the same day. So what was the reason for him building an army?
To battle.
To defend, to battle.
Yeah, to defend,
Okay.
yeah, protect.
What? Okay. And so then as a part of the 6 days of creating, he creates his man, and he says, listen, your job is to rule this place with me. I'm going to give you absolute dominion over the earth, over everything that exists on the earth and flies in the heavens, whether they're birds or other flying elements. That's an interesting conversation to have at some point.
Sure is.
Right? And he says, your job is to rule, subdue, and multiply.
With me.
Yep. Now, what are the kinds of things that you subdue? What are the kinds of things you rule over? Do you rule up over somebody who's cooperating with you? I mean,
No.
You and Ray are always working together. He's a pal. He's always on board. You guys are what? Do you rule over Ray?
Nope.
Nope. Don't need to. Why?
Yeah, he's with us. This is really good. This is really
He
good.
is with you. He is with you. But doggone it, the moment I give this opportunity for choice, there is the opportunity to oppose. And that opposition, we have to learn to deal with that.
Yeah. Well, and
So
does this relate to the whole that this battle is not between flesh and blood, but there's more at stake here that is the blessing and protecting than just what you see.
Well, of course, because that again, that's the whole story, of the garden story. There is something in play here that it's going to come after you when you are in the midst of your highest innocence and yet have a very legitimate issue you need to deal with.
Hmm.
There's a challenge that is confronting you. You are to rule over that challenge. You're to subdue it. You're to bring it under the authority of the kingdom of God. You are to exercise dominion over that thing that is creating a confrontation, a challenge to you. And then the question is, how do you do that? Now we're into the two trees in the garden. Look
Yeah.
at, there's going to be two options here for you. One is going to tell you, it's going to tell you what the right thing to do and what the wrong thing to do is. Don't buy into it. Just leave it be. It's there to remind you that this will always be an option for you. The other is life. Feast on life. Now, by the way, you may not really appreciate much how life will answer this question for you, how life will resolve this challenge for you, but stay on board with life because you're going to like the outcome. Okay? Oh my goodness, we kind of tell our kids that, don't we?
Yeah.
What's going on with that? So first thing I would say is that's exactly how God created to begin with. Jesus spoke about it repeatedly through the parables he talked about. There was this nobleman who built this vineyard, and he loaded the whole thing up. He even put a watchtower in there so they could, keep an eye on any potential intruders, and then he leased it out. And when the day came for him to get his portion of what we would call his portion of the wealth, the yield is the way you describe it. The ones that he leased it out to said, nah, we're not going to do that. We're going to keep it. So let me see if I get this right. We have one who is building a system that is designed to produce wealth at every level and also to protect that wealth.
Mm-hmm.
There's a watchtower. And then he leases it out and says, man, enter into the world of being a wealth producer. Now, when the time is right, what you do is you provide me with some of the return, some of the yield, because I have other projects like this I'm working on that I want to finance them as well. And they said, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to convert that system that is designed to produce wealth, and we're going to exploit that and utilize that to simply build wealth for us. Okay, remember we talked about knowledge provides short-term results at the expense of long-term destruction?
Yep.
What did Jesus say? What will the owner of that vineyard do after he kills the servants and even his own son? What will he do? The day will come when he's going to come after him. Well, what's he going to come after him with? The army he built in the beginning.
Wow.
Okay, watch out. This is serious business.
Yeah. Well, for those who have ears to hear, Steve, I mean, this is, what's amazing about it is the more you peel it back, the more it fits together. It's like putting a puzzle piece together and you're like,
Yes.
oh, wow, that one fits. And
They
you're like,
all
that's one's connected to this, one's connected to this, one's connected to this. And you're like, it's amazing is when you reference, this concern is like, well, what good is it? And then I'm reminded, it's like, well, no temptation is seized to accept what is common to man. This is part of this system and this part of this plan and this choice making. And I still keep coming back every time to there is a training, there is a, in the church language, it would be sanctification. There's a refining, there is a maturing process here. And it's really interesting. I watch all kinds of weird stuff online. And, one of the things I watched was they've done all this research on near-death experiences. So all these people around, and they've done these studies of people who, through hospitals and all of this kind of stuff. And it's like 97% of people who have had near-death experiences describe the same thing. And then
Hmm.
the control group kind of makes up stuff and it doesn't fit, right? They don't have the same stories, but all of these people have the same story. And it's really interesting because what is that? You're seeing something you haven't seen before.
Yes.
People are experiencing that together because what is it? It's as real as anything. I think that because it's a mystery, we think it's unknown or unknowable. And
Yeah.
here we have people who, there's story after story after story of somebody that's drowned and like, was dead for a long time. Well, one of the amazing things they said was like 12 to 15 minutes after the body dies, the brain activity as if you are fully mobile. So all the parts of your brain that from active movement and from language and processing and like all fire for a period of
Hmm.
time. And of course, when people describe what's going on, they're like, "Oh yeah, like all these people, all the situation. I was in a specific place, and the brain itself is indicating that there's a tremendous amount of activity." And that's like within 15 minutes after what the coroner would say you're dead.
Hmm.
And it's
Wow.
really interesting when you think about this, like, what's being revealed to us? Well, it's interesting now you trace back to everything that Jesus said, right? You're like, well, why was he telling us a story about this landowner? And what's really amazing about just journeying with you for the last year is it's really it's a vocabulary and language about the construct. What is true about how it's built? And in a way, you think about this aligning yourself with the framework.
Yeah.
Well, he's saying, well, that's how I did it. Like, yeah, I know it's not easy. And that's another thing that I think is interesting about this is that if this life is shortened and a bit of a training ground, right? Because storing up your treasures in heaven would refer to the fact that hey, you might be in charge of 10 cities, that there's future work to do.
Yes.
And it's really interesting to me, because I don't know all the answers. But the more and more I dig into this and more and more I connect the pieces, the more and more I realize that it really does it comes down to something very, very simple, which is, I think, illustrated with what you just said, right? The tools are neutral and you have choice, and all things are seen. And so, what choice are you going to make today, right? And if we're not to worry about tomorrow, worry about today, what are the choices you're making today? And of course, this insight that you have about these things is like, all right, well, you're responsible for you, Matt, and Steve, you're responsible for you. I made a lot of people in this thing, and it's messy, but that's the price you pay for free will.
Yeah.
And I'm going to defend that. That's part of this deal. But there are real consequences, and I think that that's the thing that you pointed out. This ain't just a game. Like there's real consequences to these decisions you're making. And I think in the church vernacular, we kind of just like, well, you're gonna weigh were you a good person or not a good person? But in reality, if all things are seen, and we're not alone in any respect, and that this is actually being examined for character, right? Do you understand it? And to think now you look at least the 66 books of the kind of Western Bible, you're like, kind of points in that direction, kind of revealing to you how it's built. And the question is, are you going to come into alignment of it? And what I see happening in our culture is we're seeing it come back to this. Like people, rather than the future being left and right, red and blue, is really about those who are saying, I am God versus recognizing the God of creation. And it's amazing, right? Transhumanism, all this kind of stuff. And it's interesting how that's the story at the beginning, too, right? People going their own way, animating the tools, killing their brother. And it's really interesting to me. Um, is it ever meant to be fully like as long as there's free will, is there ever a time when it's all right? And it seems like this kingdom thing, right? We talk about you're at Christmas and the kids are over and, whatever, it smells good and, and the kids are hugging you and you're talking with them and looking them in the eye. There's the kingdom right there.
Yeah.
Right.
Right
And
on.
you for a moment. But meanwhile, at the very exact moment, a bomb's dropped in Gaza. And here you are looking into the eyes of a grandchild,
Yeah.
and a family is being exploded.
Yeah.
And I think about that and I go, boy, the things that God can handle. And it's like, so I don't want to say that it's meaningless or futile, but at times it's really overwhelming to think that I want to do and want to make a difference, want to be faithful to this, but it's almost like a hope of something. Is it, should we keep this quote unquote faith of tomorrow can be a better day and that we can contribute to this being better and we can potentially daisy chain more of these kind of kingdom moments together? And because a big part of this feels like on one end of the spectrum, you could just like, I just want to separate myself and protect, if you will, put a watchtower up and protect this and make sure this is kingdom related and try to keep out all this other stuff. But I know that isolationism doesn't feel right. Like that's what I'm supposed to do. Um, how should people see this kind of in that macro sense, right? Because I appreciate the moments of the kingdom I see, but also I'm burdened by the destruction I see as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, think about what has become so special to you with the feeding of the 5,000. I mean, those people came out to hear what Jesus had to say. I mean, we don't think about what it would take to speak to 15 to 20,000 people in an open field.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, on its own, that's impossible. Okay. Then when we go from there, we then see, okay, what is Jesus's attitude toward them? Man, these people have been here a long time. They need to be fed. We need to take care of them. We need to do more than just preach to them. We need to take care of them. We need to reward them and in the way of providing for their investment. This is a reciprocal relationship.
yeah.
They have come, we have spoken. Now we have to reciprocate to create benefit and wealth out of that relationship. So he says, hey, disciples, you go feed them. What was their point of view? We can't do that. It
Yeah.
would take an entire year's wage to provide for these people. We don't have that in our treasury. So they looked at it from the point of view of the impossible. The entire time Jesus was bringing them into the reality of not only what was possible, but what was true. One said can't be done. The other says, hey, this is how it is done.
With
You know?
me, anything is possible.
Yep. Yep.
That's huge.
Oh, we have this one kid. Oh, cool. Now it does not matter, at least to me, how that was accomplished. He said to his disciples, you go feed them.
Yeah.
And to that, you go feed them. To that, they said that's impossible. It can't be done. And they related it to the administration and nature and character of the current system.
Yeah.
We need money, we need a year's worth of money. We don't have it. Okay, well, let's take a little bit of the wealth that is there, that is given to us. Your unlocked global generosity thing. What did the disciples end up doing? Feeding the 5,000 plus women and children. They end up actually engaging in and performing the very thing that Jesus told them to do that they declared to be impossible when they looked at it through the prism of the current nature and character that was operating the system.
Isn't it amazing? I mean, there's so much wrapped up in that story.
Yeah.
And you think about it, like imagine yourself in that situation, right? Okay, the boy brings the 5 loaves and 2 fish, and, if you're somebody that's in that system, you're like, 5 loaves and 2 fish, there's 20,000 people here, or whatever the number is.
Yeah.
You're believing that, and this is a really good word, Steve. Like, this is really helpful to me, like, really helpful. And it's clear, like, why don't I realize with God, all things are possible. And of
Now, here,
course
I'm going to speak into that just a second,
yeah,
okay? Because this is another one of those very important nuances that our translators have not given us the benefit of. We say all things are possible. You know what that word thing means? All
what's that?
things. It's
What's
the
that?
word rhema. It's the word rhema. So it should actually be translated, all things that God speaks are possible to him.
Okay.
Very
That's
important distinction.
yeah. Well, and
What,
if you think yeah,
just wrapping it up, what did Jesus say to the disciples? You go feed them.
yeah,
Was that impossible? To them it was. To
yeah,
him?
he
No.
spoke it, yeah. That's what a wonderful nuance that is, and it reinforces this whole idea of what are the implications of Jesus being alive and speaking?
Yes, right
Because
on.
what he speaks is possible
Yeah,
because it is, right? It
it's
is.
true. Yep.
Yeah, and that's, so if you're someone who is like, "Okay, all right, we'll do it." And I think what's so neat about that story is it speaks directly to this challenge, which is, all right, because there's an interesting thing, this expectation, right? So I'm sitting in a position right now where there's an unknown,
Yeah.
right? I don't know the future. I'm like one of those disciples going, 5 loaves and 2 fish ain't gonna feed all these people. And they obviously learned a lesson that day. And of course, you're really distilling it down to saying, okay, the things that are spoken, which goes all the way back to the beginning,
Yeah.
are true. And many times we would say that's a miracle, Steve. Look at the
Yeah.
miracles of Jesus. It's a miracle. Well, yeah, it's a miracle to us. It's just who he is. It's true.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting about that is the dynamic of what I've understood that to be, right? What does it mean to unlock? And I often say, did he have a bag? Did he carry a bag they didn't know about and it had fish in well, no. What did it look like when someone, because I often like try to drill into that story and just imagine what was happening along the sidelines of that story. What was the discussion of the boy with his parents? Because he didn't just have it wasn't just his food, it was likely his family's food.
Yeah.
There was likely some sort of discussion about, I want to give all this to Jesus. And I've had my son say things like, hey, let's do this. I'm like, no, let's not do that. And it's like, okay. And they said, all right, there was probably a discussion ahead of that. Like, can we give everything we have to Jesus? Can you imagine a child saying that to you? Would you ever want to stand in the way and say, no, don't give it all to Jesus? And you're like, okay, all right, yes. And it's like, and think about what it takes with the parents of the child to say, okay, yeah, take everything we got. We're not going to have anything. And you go give it to Jesus and let's see what that guy can do with it. And it reminds me of many of the times where there were these miraculous things that happened that we would call miracles. Like the woman who was bleeding, who says, if I just touch the hem of his garment,
Yeah.
like I don't need to talk to him. He doesn't need to say anything to me. He doesn't have to look at me or speak to me. And it's interesting that the kind of the activation of this is to say, if it is your will, like it's like if you speak it, you could take it to the bank. And it's interesting to see how that manifests into 12 basketfuls left over. And to me, that's the origin of this idea of unlocking. The very unlocking is like the nature of the spoken truth. It's like, no, it unlocks things because you're locked in a system that is you think is impossible.
Matt, if you have said many, many times about our um, one of our early conversations, may have even been the first one, on the phone, that we've forgotten who we are.
Yeah.
We don't even know who we are. Let's go back to your because you're right, there are so many layers here. Let's go back to your, to the parents saying to the kid, okay, go ahead. What the Elohim did with Jehovah is say, Elohim, man, your job is to exercise dominion over the earth. Well, what do you exercise dominion over? Well, that you exercise dominion over the things that jeopardize what you're doing. They put in at risk what you're doing. You rule over the things that attempt to intrude or redirect or harm the thing that you're trying to do. Well, what are we trying to do? We're trying to learn how to rule with Jesus, to fulfill the Father's vision that his man would rule his creation with him in the fullness of his nature and character. To rule over those things that put in jeopardy his vision. All right, now fast forward. You are to subdue those things that jeopardize. You're to rule over those things that jeopardize. You're to exercise dominion over those things that jeopardize. Okay, fast forward to the 5,000 men plus women and children, 15, 20,000 people. Jesus says they're hungry. They've been there all day. You guys feed them. They said, nope, can't do it. We see no way of doing that. We see the right side and left side of the slide operating here in this little story. It's the same system, just operated with two different natures and character. One says impossible, can't be done. Why? Because the way this system works is to exploit them. There's nothing to exploit from these people. We have nothing to give them, because in order to create for them, we have to give to them a year's worth of our labor in terms of money, and we don't have that. So what happens? The young boys' parents, who are the authority in the family, say, we can't abide by this. There is something that is exploiting. There is something that is jeopardizing. We must subdue it. We must exercise dominion over it. We must rule this thing that is jeopardizing this day and all that is happening here. Yep, son, you may release to Jesus what we have. We don't know how in the world that's going to make any difference, but you release it to him. And we'll begin the process of saying no to this thing that is attempting to jeopardize. No. So all up and down and what does Jesus say? Okay, now we have the means, now we have the resources, now my Father's man has stepped up, even if it's in the form of a child. Let's now do business. And what's the result? Oh, we got the right side of the slide. Not only was it 5 loaves and 2 fish in one little basket, now we have 12 baskets full of the produce that occurred out of that. Now, if you had that other slide, what you'd see is, hey, there are ways to do this.
Yeah.
See, this is not impossible. It simply requires the exercise of a choice that says, Jesus, will you teach me how to rule with you in the fullness of our Father's nature and character?
Yeah.
Will you teach me how to do that? Even in the midst of everything that I see as impossible. I'm telling you, he'll say yes.
Yeah. Well, and you think about that other slide. What does it mean? The wealth producers, right? You mentioned the last time we talked about being convinced you're a consumer. Actually,
Yeah.
you're a producer, right? The upside down nature of it is you're convinced you're a consumer. It's really interesting. You think of anyone who has authority over resources and, whether it's releasing or animating the tools, that bless and protect. And I love you use this term truth in the transaction. And what I like about that is you don't have to understand the full system to have truth in the transaction.
Yeah.
You can literally say, all right, I'm in charge of the workers. I'm in charge of I've got authority over the mine or the farm. What is fair? What is right? What is considerate? What is thoughtful? We talk about considering others in addition to yourself. Well, what is that nature and character? Well,
Yeah.
yeah, well, I'm going to consider you as a worker. Am I going to extract? And many of the times we see this in foreign lands, right? What do we see right now on the macro scale? A new president comes into a third world country. His brother-in-law gets in charge of the mines. The multinational company headquartered in Australia contacts the new guy who's in charge of concessions. They bribe that guy. He gets paid. He's rich now. And they come in and extract it from under the feet of the people that are standing there. And it's interesting. This is like the story of mineral extraction, and really the story of extraction across the world is they're not interested in the people. They're interested in the resource.
Yeah.
And they'll do whatever they can in order to extract it. And what I think, we're indicating here is whatever you have authority over, each one of these decisions can have truth in its transaction. And I think one of the things that's cool about community is to say, what is considering someone, right? And understanding, because there's also that story, the parable that about the person who started during the early part of the day and got paid, and then somebody that came late got paid the same amount. And you're like, that didn't seem fair, right? He was here at the last hour and I worked all day. And it's an interesting commentary on this whole thing is to say, what does it look like? You agreed to this, right? There was truth in this transaction at the beginning of the day.
Yes.
And there's also truth in this transaction. I can be generous if I want to be generous, and so it was not exploitive. It was clear, but you agreed to that. And it's interesting. Yeah. It's amazing how these puzzle pieces will fit. But it also, the burden kind of becomes on you once you know this is to say, all right, am I extracting? And I think that's the nature of this whole stream, right? I was convicted of, hey, this could be easily used as a means to extract.
Yeah.
This tool could be innovated by me. I could be manipulative of other people in order to get mine at your expense. And we see that, that's like the story. Well, that you brought it all the way back to the garden. This is good stuff, Steve-O.
Well, it is so fascinating, Matt, how these dots connect. Once Jesus takes you out of the religious construct that we've been trained in.
Yeah.
It last week I'm kind of surprised we have anybody, listening here today. If we do, other than Mike and a couple of others,
Yeah.
because we really hit a core belief system.
Yeah.
And, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Well, we have been told something about what that verse means that has nothing to do with what even the context is talking about. And yet, if you go to what the verse is actually saying, the lines of defenses that are put in place is to keep you from doing that, because if you probe it, you're going to find out what's actually there.
Yeah.
You did it with the word, headlong.
Yeah.
You look at that and you say, what? I could have used a dozen different words. That one isn't even in the universe of thought for that. Okay, so why did you do that? You mentioned early on this idea about strategy. Well, what I shared with the folks is, hey, God is the one who created his system to administer his creation. He loves that. It's designed to produce good. And if you believe in what the sun is designed to do, then the sun will convert that world system that is being used now that produces death and destruction, that causes you to perish. It will actually produce life for you.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, really? Well, that's rewriting scripture. Or that's, whatever the accusation. No, let's pause. If we say that the scriptures are true and valid, and some will even say, infallible and inerrant, then wouldn't the definitions of those words also be true and credible and inerrant and infallible? Okay, well then let's look at the definitions and see what they say. Because then a connection point is, once you see that it's God's man who operates with him in the fullness of his nature and character to administer his system, transforms this thing from an instrument of destruction to an instrument of a quality of life that will last forever. Oh, man, Paul talked about that very thing in Romans 8, that the whole creation longs for the revealing of the sons and daughters, the children of God, so that it can be set free from the futility that it operates under.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, that didn't say that Jesus was going to do that the revealing of Jesus was going to do that. It was the sons of God. Whoa, plural. Oh my goodness, if that does not connect right back to the garden.
Yeah.
Man, you're supposed to exercise dominion over this, to rule over the things that jeopardize. That instead of producing a quality of life that extends to the ages, it will instead produce death and destruction in you. Well, Jesus, you just connected the dots.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa, I am a party in this game.
Well, and that's
I do play a role. Whoa, how about that?
Well, and isn't that that's the beauty of this journey. And you said at the very beginning, he doesn't drop it all on you at once. It's a process. And I appreciate the fact that it's not dumped on us all at once, overwhelming us with it. It's cool. Crypto Stylist stopped in, and I have not seen her in forever and a day. It's a good sign that you are here, at least came in and said hello. So thank you so much for being here, Crypto Stylist. Susie Q as well. Yeah, so great to see you here. Samurai Dan celebrating 27th anniversary. Fantastic. Good to see you, Samurai Dan. He's got samurai.coffee.
Yes, I've checked him out.
That's him. That's him. Well, let's take this in a bizarre direction, but it's the same concept.
Hey, if I may, the whole point of this is that this is connected.
Yeah.
We are not on the outside looking in. We're not helpless on the inside looking out. We are key players in this thing, and it's not a problem of the system. It's a problem of the one administering the system. And once that reality connects, things start to get much clearer in how we deal with our day-to-day challenges, responsibilities, etc.
Well, and I think that's
kind of going back to your first comment.
Yeah. Well, and I see this as, the onboarding education of Jesus is one of fire insurance.
Yeah.
And also this, I think, poor theology of you being raptured or jettisoned off of a planet to some other place is actually poor thinking, and it's detrimental. Because what once you get to this point where you're diving into the actual words and you're saying, okay, what does this mean? That actually this place is created for perfection and was created for good. And in its understanding, it's revealing your own purpose in it. Because I think what's so funny is the people that do accuse this of, well, you're rewriting this or that. Well, the question is this: I can show you a bunch of different cases, and you would never disagree with me if you were raised in the church, that you would become a child of God, that there is this family construct, and that you are grafted in, and you are actually, if he's the firstborn, right? He is the firstborn, that you are in the line of him,
Yes.
and that you are a son, you are an heir, you
Yeah.
have authority, you have the ring, you have these things. And of course, this story of the prodigal son, we'd understand the nature and character of our father and go, oh my gosh, I'm going to come back to you. Well, now that you've come back to me, you get the authority, and now you have work to do. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, yeah, we have a responsibility, and that's it, right? Ruling and reigning in his nature and character. And you're like, hold on, so with you, it's better? Yeah, 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 yeah. That's kind of the theme of this whole thing. And
Yes.
it's like, okay, so with you in your nature and character of what I have authority over, and this is super helpful, like super helpful, because it roots things in purpose that traces itself all the way back, right?
Yes.
I don't believe that God is saying, I have to solve the Middle East crisis today, right? That's not the sense I'm getting.
No.
But I do have a responsibility in my home. I do have a responsibility in my relationships. I do have a responsibility of where he's placed me. And is that enough? Yeah, that's enough, right? He's so that's very cool. Just as a side note here before we wrap up, I want to insert this kind of just thought that I had while you were sharing all of that. We talked about the collapsing of the waveform.
Yeah.
We talked about that a couple episodes ago, and I'm really into the framework, right? How is the framework built? I learned about piezoelectricity. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but if you've ever,
Yeah.
those lighters that you click them and they light up and you light your fire or your barbecue with.
Oh, yeah.
So what that has in it is a piece of quartz, and it uses the piezoelectric concept. And so what happens is there's a spring and it strikes a quartz crystal. That quartz crystal becomes polarized, so much energy that it actually jumps across the leads, and if there's gas there, it lights it. And so it's the physical squeezing of quartz, which is bizarre, is actually high voltage, and that's the framework of quartz, right? One of the things that's amazing about this, and what a bizarre reference here, but when you think about ruling and reigning, and you take that into the quantum realm of the collapsing of the waveform, and you think about the spoken word, right? It's amazing when we started looking at this spooky action in the distance and doing all of these things that were, you know, Schrodinger's equations, and going, hold on, how is it possible that it looks like, when I look at it, it's a particle, but when I'm not looking, it's a wave. I see the interference pattern. It's like, so observation has a material effect. And of course, you could extrapolate that to like, wow, we're watching the very framework render in real time, and it's contingent upon who we are. And of course, there's a lot of people in the new age world that are like, yeah, I can manifest these things. Well, yeah, you can, because the framework that God has created relies upon his man to rule and to reign over his creation. And then when you actually observe things, you're bringing to it the thing that he gave you that is of him. That's what makes you unique. And it's interesting to think that I think the scientific world would say, what is the level and impact of our consciousness? And, effortlessly in our observation, it collapses the waveform, is actually speaks to, in my opinion, what you're talking about. This idea that we are an extension of the one who created, that we are endowed with his character and nature, and that as we align ourselves with him, the material world changes. And to think that we're not manifesting for just our own reward, but in the context of with him, is the beauty of this thing, right?
Yes.
And we illustrated that with the feeding of the 5,000, is that a moment before you're like, it's impossible, but that's every time is like, do you want to be healed? And he's like, hello, I've been standing by. cool for a long time. And it's like, well, of course I want to be healed. Okay. Okay. And I love that relationship because it does require our action. And I
Yeah.
think that that's the thing that I kind of gather from this. That this is truly a partnership, but you have forgotten who you are. You don't recognize actually the power that you have. And, Jesus even saying to the disciples, you'll do greater things than these.
Yeah.
Why do you think he said that? Because you, in my nature and character, if you're doing it with me, are an extension of me.
Yeah.
And of course, that fits with the whole Elohim man concept. It's like, no, it's like we cherry pick these things and we don't see it in its entirety. And so one, it's confusing to people and it builds up these doctrines of like not intentional lies, but they're misunderstandings that makes this so much more rich and it makes me appreciate our time together a lot.
Well, thanks, Matt. I appreciate it as well. And we talked yesterday that if you listen to the planet, if you listen to the global cry of the people who occupy the planet, they're screaming out, "Will somebody please just tell me the truth?"
Yeah.
The lie has so swallowed us up that we don't even know what the truth is anymore. Will somebody please just tell me the truth? Well, we're telling them the truth.
Yeah.
And it's not a doctrinal construct. It's not a religious construct. It is a person who created the planet, who has a design in it that that if we're willing to occupy and administer that planet with him, we will find that, man, it is not only good, it is very good. Why? Because that's what he spoke.
It's so amazing. We said this before, but I want to say it again. It's so great. There's all these people that are worried about what they're calling ASI, which is artificial super
Intelligence, yeah.
Yeah. So right now we're in the world of make your chat GPT do the thing you want it to do. Right. And I was watching or listening to a podcast last night about how young poker players today are using AI for these things called solvers. And AI is able to take in all the components. Like I'm on the button, raise this much. I got this opponent. This is the cards. This is on the board. Solve this for me. And you're getting insight into something that humans just can't do. And so these young poker players are racking up all of these experiences on every possible combination of cards to understand this optimal play. And, that gives you an advantage, right? You got set rules and all the possible scenarios. And if you do the study, you can understand where you are in every situation. And it's interesting that what are we currently using AI for? To get an advantage.
Yeah.
Okay? That's the beginning. What's crypto at the beginning? I want to get an advantage. I want 10,000x diamond hands, big bags, win Lambo. But it looks like, people are saying, well, it becomes generalized intelligence. And of course, the story of this is we remember when IBM beat the world champion at chess. And then they took it into a new game called Go, right? Not new, but a more complex game called Go. And then it beat the top Go player. And this was preceding this whole ChatGPT stuff. And it's like now we're seeing, okay, this artificial learning that's built on the framework of the neurons and synapses of the brain, and now postulating general intelligence and then super intelligence. And it's really interesting to me to think of, nothing is outside of the framework of God's creation. Like nothing, there's nothing. In a way, we just model, we just kind of mimic what he made in basically everything we do. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people think that what's coming from super intelligence is their version of intelligence.
Yeah.
And I think what's really interesting about this, and what might be a surprise, is the insights that you've shared with me that I've probed to be true is really what superintelligence is.
Yeah.
What is the truth?
Yeah.
Because general intelligence and current models are my truth.
Yes.
So I can get an advantage. Be careful what you wish for,
Yeah.
because superintelligence may not favor you. And I don't mean that it's going to be Terminator and destroy people. What I'm saying is it may expose you for who you are.
Yeah.
And what I think is fascinating about that is to think that, one of the things they're saying about, um, at least generalized intelligence, if not super intelligence, is that we're even seeing amazing things at the quantum level. And if we have tools and abilities to, let's say 3D print at the atomic level, the potentials for energy, the potential for all sorts of things are just wildly amazing. But we don't have that capability right now. We're kind of brute force. We think we're modern, but we're still pushing magnets across coils, right? And then we don't realize that, hold on, God's creation is one of abundance.
Yeah.
And then as we continue to drill closer and closer and closer to this thing that we're, some people are fearful of, some people are, it's really interesting that we may find ourselves in that singularity moment, recognizing that actually the truth will be revealed. And I don't mean ASI as a computer, as it is an entity like us, but it is one that is actually marching headlong into truth. And that truth will expose. And in a really interesting way, there's a possibility that once it's not under your control of your nature and character, it actually may be in the nature and character of what is true.
What's fascinating and in these kinds of conversations, and welcome aboard, folks. This is this is what we get into, is in the Tower of Babel story, the people were building a tower to heaven. Now, I'm not sure that they were using intelligence in that, because that determined, at least to me anyway, a shortfall or an error in the calculus was that, is there enough material on the planet to reach up into the skies that are unreachable? And then how would that work? But, nonetheless, their intention was to build a tower that reached into heaven.
Yeah.
So the way the story goes, Jehovah said, hey, man, I'm going to go down and check out and see what the boys are up to. And he went down there and he said, wow, there is nothing that will be impossible to these people. So he said, okay, lest they reach up into the heavens, what we're going to do is confuse their language. What would happen if now the nature and character was not to reach up into heaven, but to accept our place seated with Christ in heavenly places, and then use our language to produce the kingdom on earth as it is in heaven?
That's it.
That's it in a nutshell.
And
what role? Now let's go to AI, super intelligence. What do those devices draw on? Information. See? And so the information in its raw state is neutral.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It makes no judgment about what is true or error. It simply describes what the state of that object or situation is. It's the character that twists that. Oh, which, by the way, the scriptures call iniquity, taking what is true and twisting it to accomplish or to accommodate the view of the twister. Okay, remove that with superintelligence to your very point.
Yeah.
And now you get all the way back to this place where Jesus says, if you are my disciples, if my word abides in you and you are truly disciples of mine, then you will know the truth. And what will the truth do? It'll set you free. And the free man, the free woman, that is what the creation is anxiously longing to see revealed, because those are the people that will free it from its bondage to futility. Matt, that's where we're going if we're interested. You know, that's the transfer. Transfer the man, and all that the man is, has, and will ever be comes with him. And it may start with a simple pushing of the resources to say, man, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get there, but here's what I do know how to do. I do know how to make available to you my 5 loaves and 2 fish.
Amen. Wow.
See? Take it and show me how your kingdom works. These people are hungry. They're thirsty. They've been here all day. You yourself have said to feed them. We don't have any food, but here's the food we do have. Do your thing, Jesus. Show us how this thing works. Man, I don't know about you, Matt, but that's a bigger way of thinking.
It sure
Than
is.
just make a couple of bucks on a margin call. You know.
Yep. Well, folks, you heard it here first, man. Well, this is why we do this, right? And it's a blessing. Wow. I'm just like, you know, it's really encouraging to know that it all makes sense, because I think there's so many people in this world, including myself, who get so knocked off center, right? And going, man, what's it all for? And feel so lost. And it's like, Steve, thank you. Right? You don't realize, I think it's, it's something you've been doing for so long. And it's like, well, yeah, then let me just tell you about what I've been kind of talking to Jesus about. And, it's big, but you don't realize how big. And you might have an idea, but it's, I hope for those that are watching this that, or will watch it, understand and probe it. Right.
Yes.
And I always like to say this. I always like to say this. This is a demonstration of what Steve and I do. This is what we do. We talk about weird stuff. We talk about all this kind of stuff, and it's helpful, right? But it's based in interest, right? I'm interested in what you think about this stuff, or what and you're interested. I'm interested in what Jesus says to me this morning about Jude 1:11, right? And like, it's an active thing, and it reflects the fact that Jesus is alive and he speaks.
Yes.
And I feel like that's at the core of this whole thing. We're living in an upside down world. And that if you're interested, he can make it right side up. But be ready. It's a journey, but it's not meant to harm you.
Oh,
It's
no.
actually it's meant to strengthen you. And that's really cool. And we need more of that.
Yeah.
So thank you, Steve, for another 34. Episode number 34. It's so great.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. Thanks, Steve.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, folks. There we go. Episode 34 in the books. Well, another good one, man. I never know where this stuff's going to go. And to see it go where it goes, it's such a benefit to me. And I hope it's a benefit to you. I mean, it may be or may not. This is... it's really important, right? This is a picture of community. You can do the role that Steve's playing with others, right? I really, truly, because I had a bit of a crisis about this whole crypto thing, right? Going, I don't want to be someone who participates in the strengthening of an extraction model, but want to be one in which animates these things for good, right? This literally says, hey, this way to the food. And it's so crazy because it's so refining. So, hope it was beneficial to you. Have a great weekend. And 2024 is coming, folks. What have we known about that? Everything changes in the new year. We got the happening coming up. There's a lot of exciting things happening. You know, um, don't give up, and don't mess with Texas. Take care, everybody.